We can configure OSPF authentication on an interface or on all interfaces on the local area for that router. That is not the way to go. And I say that really emphatically. Don't set it up per area. I'll show you the config, but I will not do the config. I will do the per interface config. And then you configure the authentication key per interface, and the key type is going to control the syntax for how you configure the key. Let's get into kind of the basic building blocks. Firstly, all OSPF authentication, when we do this, it attaches itself to the hellos, the database descriptor packets, the LSR, the LSU. So we're authenticating not just updates, but hellos. So we are also controlling neighborship. We can, by default, set this up with no authentication. You can do clear text or simple passwords. That's plain text. That's clear text. Don't do that. Use cryptographic authentication. That's the way to really do this in the real world. And when we do the cryptographic, we get a hash created by MD5. That's our algorithm there. Don't do the clear text because you could sniff that and expose the used password for OSPF, and hopefully you haven't used it for anything else. Let's see the syntax to do this. So the syntax is go into interface configuration mode and turn on authentication and then reference the key. I want you to notice something. This is the pitfall. Authentication key says this is my clear text authentication key. You're not going to do this in the real world. You're not going to do this in the real world because you're going to be setting up MD5 authentication instead. Here's another thing I don't want you to do. Go into router configuration mode and then say, hey, area 1 authentication. That doesn't say to the whole area, I want all interfaces in this area to run authentication. Nope. What it does is it says, look for all interfaces on this router that are in this area, and then turn on authentication. Don't do it that way. Let me show you how to do this. What you should be doing is this. You go into your interface. You say IP OSPF authentication. Now, the plain vanilla structure started this way, but if we press enter, we don't get MD5. We need to add message digest into our configuration. When we do that, we flip the switch. Now we're getting the cryptographic authentication that we want. And then notice that the structure for the key is different. Message digest key instead of authentication key. That's a common pitfall. I don't want you setting up authentication key. Authentication key is for clear text, which you should not be doing. So when we're doing context-sensitive help, we need to steer clear of authentication key and we need to do message digest key. So get that in your head. That's a real challenge. And then we have a key ID of 1, MD5, which these two have to match the opposing side, and then a shared secret key. Like how I was emphatic about not using area authentication for clear text, the same key applies. Don't do the area authentication config. And I'm not alone. This is not just me. This is considered a very antiquated configuration. We're talking, people did this 10 years ago. I did this 10 years ago. Yep. When I got my CCIE, that's how it was done. But it's not the way to do it anymore. So you now have the building blocks to properly configure OSPF authentication. And if there was any doubt, it's this syntax right up here. That's the only OSPF authentication syntax that you should be doing for OSPFv2, which is for IPv4.